you think maybe we should take this off the pallet? Good. So my work was nice enough to let me get all of that delivered to our place because it came on freight. And then we just got it loaded into the back of our truck. So now I have to go back to work, but just so you kind of know what's going on, I just got an order from Organic Mechanics, and I ended up with 12 bags of 2 cubic foot, just so you know what's going on, I ended up with 12 bags of 2 cubic foot potting soil. I also ended up with 24 2 cubic foot bags of planting mix for raised beds, and then 14 1 cubic foot bags of biochar blend, which will be added into the soil. But we'll talk about that when I get home. So I'm gonna go finish work and I will talk to you then. Bye. So welcome to my shed. It's actually been a couple days since I got the load of Organic Mechanics in, but I kind of want to talk about some of the things that I got. I ended up getting the Organic Mechanics, throw it up here, planting mix and compost blend. Now this is used for raised beds, revitalizing garden soil and such. There's a number of other things on here that you can use it for, but this is generally used for larger square footage type stuff because it's a little more dense. It's not generally used for like potting, like, you know, container, small like pots and stuff like that, you know, we generally do up. So I've got 9 more bags of this. I ended up getting 25. Then I also got the biochar blend, which I was really excited to use because I've been hearing a lot more about biochar and the great advantages of it, and I wanted to give it a try. So I've used a couple bags in my big planter, the big raised bed, which I'll show you here in a minute, and you only use it like 10%. So really, if you're doing containers, this bag could really last you a long time. But I ended up getting like 12 of those. And then I have the regular just potting mix, which is really helpful because I'm constantly running out of potting mix. I'm either potting something up or making a new container, because, you know, we're all obsessed with making more containers because we find more plants. So I've got about 12, 15 bags of that, something like that. I can't remember. But in the meantime, I think I'm fully set for the rest of the season and going into the next season. The reason I chose organic mechanics is because it's peat-free. That's the biggest thing right now, is I want to get away from companies that are using peat in their potty mixes or any of their bagged products like that. Because it's depleting peat bogs, which is a carbon sink source for the environment, and we're taking away from it so rapidly, and the peat bogs take so long to rebuild. I mean, it takes forever to create 1 millimeter of peat in order to capture more carbon. We're literally doing the environment no good. And these are very small ecosystems for the environment and a very special niche that, why are we taking away from something that could eventually, and probably will, create catastrophic events across the board? So, you know, without being a tree hugger, just stop buying peat. But let me show you what we've got going on. So welcome to my war zone. This area is gonna become something, because frankly it's become a hot mess. We're storing old windows over there for the greenhouse for next year. I'm praying to God we get it there. Some plants on my nursery bench, which is a large pallet with huge wheels. Some random bricks that came from this brick pile of stuff because I'm making pathways out of that. And then you can just kind of see there's some other stuff. We've got our wood stacked over there for fires, a tarp with topsoil, which we'll get to in a minute, and then these raised beds and a random planted boxwood. But what are we doing in this section, and why are we using raised beds? We have black walnut trees. This whole area is a grove of black walnuts. And if you know anything about black walnuts, you can't plant under it. So the misconception is you can't plant anything under black walnuts. The roots, the nuts, the leaves, the branches, everything is toxic about this plant. And that is somewhat true. They do put out a competitive chemical called Juglone, and that's gonna stop plants from essentially taking off under them, because they want to be competitive about nutrients and water, sunlight, all of that type of stuff. But there's many educational research papers that are out there by universities that have shown that plants do actually grow under the canopies and in the root zones of black walnuts. So there might be a few things that you want to try under here, like I do, that don't want to grow under black walnuts. And that's where we're going to show you a couple ways that you can get away with this. In fact, I'll link down below with a comprehensive list of plants that are shown to actually grow under black walnuts, and I'm actually planting a ton of them under here, so we'll be able to track and show you exactly how well these plants are doing. But to start, I'm using raised beds. These beds came from forevergardenbeds.com. They are a steel bed that you can put to any size that you want. I chose to go with 3x8 on both of them. This one is a 31-inch height, and the one next to me that you saw is a 17-inch height. I don't get why it's not an even numbers, but it's not my company. They've been really great. They're easy to install. They come with a rubber edging to protect you from that. This one, because of its height and depth, there are some rods that go in, and I think I placed them down on the third, but basically they're somewhat in the middle to help the weight and pressure of the soil. There's a couple things that you want to do in order to conserve on soil. So I took a number of logs that we had from a tree that was cut down, and I placed them in the bottom layer as evenly as possible and as many as I could get in there, and that only raised me up about 6 inches. From there, I went in with branches, layered them in, filling in all the kind of the cracks. You want to fill it in because the soil gets put in and you water it in, it's going to sink in between all those little crevices. So you kind of want to like fill those so you're not wasting soil. From there, I went in with unfinished compost. This was stuff that I had cut down from last year. I don't do hot composting, I just do a cold. I let it naturally just kind of slowly break down as I throw stuff on it. And in a few years, I'll probably get some compost. Lazy man way out. But I threw in like grasses still that were on in there, branches, hibiscus stalks that I cut down at the beginning of the season. I threw those in there, and then I used the rest of the bin, which was all unfinished, and just kept layering it in there till I got to finished on top. So I got about halfway there, roughly. We ended up using 16 bags in this. We ended up mixing with this with topsoil. It's recommended on the website that you use it at 25 to 50% topsoil to the compost blend. Now, none of these plants are planted. I was just kind of playing around last night because I was kind of excited that I got the big one done, but I still have the small one to do. Now, the small one, I kind of went a different route because I didn't feel like going back over there and robbing the woods of sticks. Yes, shame on me. To be fair, we put them there. I'm just taking them back. Creating habitat over here as well, dispersing it evenly. But I ended up just taking one of my entire bins. I didn't know what stage it was as far as composting because we turn over a lot of stuff into it, and I just layered it in. So let me just kind of show you what I've got so far before I put the topsoil and the rest of the bagged compost in. So this is what it looks like, my unfinished compost. You can kind of see it must have gotten some bags of potting soil mixed in because there's some perlite and vermiculite in there. But I don't know how this got so good looking versus my other bins that have been sitting there so long, but I'm truly happy with it. Since this area is lower to the ground at 17 inches and plants can generally get their roots down there, I wanted to make sure that there was a good amount of goodness throughout this entire bed without filling it up with filler to support the plants that I'm putting in here. So before I go in and add the mix of potting blend, I'm going to put in some of the biochar just to activate this a little bit and create a nutrient reservoir. And then I'm going to go ahead and start layering in all my other stuff. So all in all, we should have really good success in this area because we're getting the plant roots elevated away from the root and the contaminated soil from the black walnuts. Like I said, there's quite a few here. Another thing that we need to keep on top of when we're planting under black walnuts is actually leaves, branches, and the nuts themselves, which are constantly dropping. Actually, like there's some right here. And what will happen is the plant will expel some of these because it's trying to support them. But we'll get rid of some of these because it is still pretty dry right now this time of year. And I throw them back in the woods, let them grow, let the squirrels find them. But we need to keep those out of the raised beds. And then we'll do that just in general underneath the canopy to kind of prevent as much as that. And then as years go by and we add more mulch and compost into the area, this area is going to get a little bit better and a little less toxic for even the plants that are able to handle this type of situation. So keep that in mind. We still need to keep cleanup. It's a little bit of an extra step, but you gain a whole area of being able to plant under. Now, if this is an open higher canopy for you and you're thinking, oh, it would be great, I'll put raised beds under here and I'll grow tomatoes and potatoes and stuff like that, you have to keep them in raised beds. That's the only option for those. They're super, super sensitive to the juglone and they'll just die. So there's no planting in the ground when it comes to vegetables. Other than that, let's get started on filling the rest of this bed. And then I'm going to show you just a couple of the plants that I'm looking at adding into this area. And we're going to start making over this area a little by little. It's probably going to flow into the next season. So don't get excited. This whole thing is going to be done this year. Just saying. So now that we've gotten this bed filled up, I kind of wish I would have gone up just a little bit more, maybe to just like a few inches below. But I know with the amount of plants that I'm going to plant in here, soil's going to get shifted and it's going to be raised up. Plus Plus, this is an area that I'm looking down on this garden. I'm not necessarily going to be always looking at it from the side view because I'm going to plant around it as well. But what I suggest is if you have done any filler products, the branches, logs, unfinished compost type of situation, layering at the bottom of these before you put it in your regular soil, I really suggest watering it down. And I mean watering it. Take this thing off. You should be coming right from the hose. And then watering that in so that everything sinks and gets into all those crevices so you know exactly how much you're going to fill it up with, then put your potting soil in. So let's talk about some of the plants that can be planted in and around black walnuts with no problem. According to the list that I found on a couple different university websites, first is going to be coral bells. So this area is partly shady, and then it ventures out into some sun, so we'll be able to mix and mingle and keep that cohesiveness going around. But I'm going to be using some of my coral bells. I've got a black variety, and then I've got this one. This one's Northern Exposure, Heuchera. Some of them have gotten eaten up by bugs. It's just that time of year. We're verging on the end of the season, so I'm not too worried about how well the plants look. As long as they get settled into their container, into the new raised beds or into the ground, there shouldn't be an issue. Other plants that are good around black walnuts are astilbes. This one I'm going to be using is called Key West. It gets a bronze foliage and then pink flowers on this, kind of verging on the red. Should have a red stem. This has been in a lot of shade, so it will get better color in some more part sun situation. I'm also going to be using hellebores. And then on the outskirts further out into the more sun exposure, I've got this beautiful smoke bush. This one's called Lila smoke bush. It's starting to put on some of its fall color. I don't know if you can notice that, but it's putting on like pink edges. I love smoke bush because they're just beautiful when they're backlit. And then I'm also thinking about using this guy. This is Golden Duke Eastern Hemlock. I love hemlocks. I'm obsessed with them. Unfortunately, there's a bug that's going around for hemlocks. So this is something that you have to be kind of, taking the risk on, but it's a risk I'm willing to take. I have Golden Duchess as well, which I plant it in a container, and then I have one out in the front yard in a part shade location, and I've had her for years, and she just bulked up really, really well. This one's a little slower growing. This will get 10 foot tall, 4 foot wide. It has a golden cast to it and more sun. Obviously it's greened out right now, but the new growth does come in on golden, and it does keep that in a little bit more sun. But let's talk about some of the plants that don't necessarily do good according to research under black walnuts that I'm going to be putting in the raised containers. First and foremost, aside from hydrangea arborescens, which is a smooth hydrangea, such as the most common one is called Annabelle. No hydrangea is going to grow under these conditions. They just don't do good, and especially macrophylla. But I want to put this beauty. Some of the flowers are starting to fade. This is Seaside, hopefully you can hear me, Seaside Serenade from Monrovia. It's a Monrovia exclusive. This is called Glacier Bay. Pure white flowers on black stems. And then if you look, see that? It's blood red up to the petalites. And she's still blooming. There's still more to come. As it fades, it kind of gets this limey green color to it, which I really like. I think that's really neat, but there's so much new growth at the base of this plant. I mean, it's continuously blooming. This does bloom on new and old wood. All the Seaside Serenade varieties do bloom on new and old wood, so they're really, really easy. They're hardy to zones 4 through 8, I believe. This one's gonna get about 3 to 4 foot tall, 3 foot wide, 3 to 4 foot wide. So it's nice. It can be tucked in anywhere. And I only have one. I think I want to get another one. Haven't figured it out. But this one's going to go out into the smaller bed. Other plants, and one that I didn't notice on the list was this one. This is Ligularia Pandora. It's a short blackleaf variety. It's not going to get that size that most other ligularias get, like Brit Marsh. So this would be a really great substitution in small gardens. This one I think only gets about 16 inches tall. It's very slow growing, so it's not going to take over either. So keep that one in mind. I love the black foliage. Like, it's almost like an olive green. If it gets in a little bit more sun, it'll take on more black. And then the other thing that there's two more plants that I did not see on this list. And the one I'm going to double check on is black mondo grass. We call this lily turf, but I propagated a number of these from the plant that I have, and I'm going to just keep them in the raised beds. I might sacrifice one or two into the ground, and we'll see what happens, and maybe we can add that to a good list. And then last but not least, I love, and I've been obsessed with this fern. This is Jurassic Gold wood fern. Based on the name, the scientific name, I'm gonna have to double check on this one. If it was on the list, I didn't really honestly look, but most ferns are good under black walnuts planted right into the ground. This one gets that bright orange foliage, and I've talked about this in my fern table because I did add one there. So I have 4 of them now. I'm just really excited about this pop of color. So mostly everything in this area is going to be on the darker side of foliage with little pops, green and fun colors. Bloom doesn't matter to me, other than I am going to try to mix in some blacks. So I think we're just going to wrap up the video here. So I'm using raised beds for plants that generally can't handle the Juglone, but there's many plants on that list, and I want you to take a second to go look at that and realize that you can really plant under black walnuts. Even if it's just you want to amend the soil just a little bit to feel better about it, that's fine too. But wide variety of things, a really big list between trees, shrubs, some edibles are on there, bulbs, pretty much any bulb can handle it, which I was pretty shocked by. Lilies weren't on that list, I don't believe. And there's a few annuals, but I'm willing to try a few more annuals under here. I noticed like Nicotiana wasn't on that list, but in the bed that flanks over here, I've got some planted on the edge, and aside from it's just really dry, they're surviving and they're doing good. So next video, we'll talk about kind of the layout of this bed and what the future plans for it are. So thanks for stopping by. We'll see you in the next one. Especially in the fact that I'm using an organic peat-free compost mix, which is surprisingly, let me tell you, it's the same price as regular potty soil. Oh, thanks, bug. You still there? Okay.